Emma Ward, the fearless journalist who vanished without a trace. Caleb Mercer, the reclusive programmer who claimed to know too much. Sheriff Alan Briggs, the trusted lawman entangled in a web of secrets. These are just a few of the names tied to one of the most chilling and elusive criminal organizations ever uncovered, the Shadow Syndicate. Their stories are threads in a larger tapestry of corruption, power, and fear, where no one is safe, and the truth is the most dangerous weapon of all. The Vanishing Act. In the autumn of 2016, the quiet town of Briarwood was thrust into chaos when Emma Ward, a 28-year-old investigative journalist, vanished without a trace. Briarwood had always been the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Its picturesque streets, lined with quaint cafes and historic homes, gave the impression of a peaceful community untouched by the shadows of crime. That illusion was shattered the day Emma disappeared. Emma was no ordinary journalist. She had a reputation for uncovering truths that others preferred to keep hidden. Her articles had exposed corruption in city councils, illegal land deals, and even ties between powerful corporations and organized crime. Fearless and determined, she was admired by some and hated by many. The night she disappeared, Emma had attended a late meeting downtown. Surveillance footage captured her entering a dimly lit parking garage just before midnight. She was carrying her laptop bag, her steps brisk but calm. That was the last time anyone saw her. Hours later, her phone went silent, and her apartment remained eerily undisturbed. A week later, her car was found on the outskirts of town, parked on a desolate back road that led into the dense Briarwood forest. The vehicle was spotless, as if it had been meticulously cleaned. There were no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate where Emma might have gone. Her laptop, phone, and the file she was working on were missing. The discovery of her abandoned car only deepened the mystery and left authorities with more questions than answers. As news of Emma's disappearance spread, so did rumors. Some speculated she had uncovered something too dangerous, something that forced her into hiding. Others whispered about a secret group that operated in the shadows, silencing anyone who got too close to their secrets. It is insane to see an R. Kelly film and see the heat he has built for himself. A few dismissed her vanishing as a random crime, but those who knew Emma found that explanation hard to believe. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation hit one dead end after another. The parking garage's security footage offered no clues. The cameras conveniently malfunctioned after capturing Emma's entry. Witnesses in the area recalled nothing unusual. The lack of leads was frustrating, but to those following the case closely, it felt deliberate. Then a chilling detail surfaced. Emma had confided in a colleague just days before she vanished, saying she was onto something big, but refused to share specifics. She mentioned feeling watched, though she brushed it off as paranoia. This revelation cast a dark shadow over the investigation. What had she discovered that was so dangerous it could cost her life? For Briarwood, Emma's disappearance was more than a tragedy. It was a wake-up call. The town's peaceful facade began to crumble, revealing cracks that hinted at something far more sinister lurking beneath. Residents, once comforted by their community's predictability, now looked over their shoulders, wondering if Emma's fate could befall someone else. The disappearance of Emma Ward was no ordinary case. It wasn't just a missing person. It was the opening act in a story that would expose secrets no one was prepared to confront. Chapter 2. The names belonged to some of the most powerful figures in Briarwood: politicians, business tycoons, law enforcement officials. The deeper the investigators dug, the more it became clear that these people were not just connected. They were complicit in a shadowy network of corruption that Emma had been investigating before she vanished. Emma's files painted a disturbing picture of a covert organization she referred to as the Shadow Syndicate. Her notes hinted at money laundering, extortion, and a system of blackmail so intricate it seemed almost impossible to untangle. She had been meticulously piecing together the syndicate's operations for months, documenting every clue she uncovered. One entry described how she had been followed on multiple occasions, her home broken into twice, though nothing of value was taken. She suspected her movements were being tracked, her phone tapped, her life under constant surveillance. As investigators analyzed the files, strange obstacles began to arise. Witnesses tied to Emma's research refused to talk, their fear palpable. A retired banker whose name appeared in one of Emma's documents suffered a sudden heart attack hours before his scheduled interview. A key file from Emma's flash drive mysteriously corrupted overnight, rendering vital evidence unusable. These incidents, though seemingly coincidental, painted a clear message. Someone was watching, and they were determined to keep the syndicate's secrets buried. The evidence pointed to a network with a reach that extended far beyond Briarwood. Financial records linked syndicate activities to offshore accounts, shell companies, and illicit deals in neighboring cities. It became evident that the organization was a well-oiled machine, built on layers of secrecy and fear. Those entangled in its web were either complicit or terrified into silence. The organization's power seemed absolute, its leaders faceless, its influence invisible, yet omnipresent. The more investigators learned, the more their progress stalled. A promising lead involving a high-profile developer endeavored when the individual abruptly fled the country. A journalist following up on Emma's work was nearly killed in a suspicious car crash. Every move to expose the syndicate seemed to result in an equal and opposite reaction, as though the organization anticipated their every step. It became clear to law enforcement that this wasn't just a local criminal enterprise. It was something far larger, far more insidious. The syndicate had built a fortress of control, using fear and manipulation as its strongest weapons. Emma Ward's discovery of its existence had likely cost her her life, and now those chasing her story felt the weight of the same danger. In unraveling the syndicate's web, the investigators realized they weren't just fighting for justice, they were fighting to survive. Chapter 3. The Silent Witness. Caleb Mercer was an enigma to the outside world, a man who had spent years hiding in plain sight. Few in Briarwood remembered him, and even fewer could recall ever speaking to him. His reclusive nature was a perfect cover for the role he had played in the Shadow Syndicate's rise to power. From a small cabin deep in the mountains, he had built the technological backbone of their empire, an intricate web of surveillance systems and encrypted communication networks. It was the same technology that had made him a prisoner. Once the work was complete, the syndicate ensured he could never leave. Every attempt to sever ties with the group had been met with thinly veiled threats and reminders that they knew where to find him. Possibilities. The syndicate's power lay not only in its wealth, but in its ability to predict and manipulate the actions of its enemies. By monitoring phone calls, emails, and even in-person meetings through covert surveillance, they could stay one step ahead of any threat. But Caleb's most disturbing revelation was the archive, a secure database containing evidence of the crimes, secrets, and vulnerabilities of everyone tied to the syndicate. The archive served as both a weapon and a shield. It allowed the syndicate to blackmail even the most powerful individuals, ensuring their silence or cooperation. Those who resisted were destroyed by the very information they thought was hidden. Despite his cooperation, Caleb was deeply paranoid. He refused to meet in person, insisting that all communication take place through encrypted channels. He provided fragments of the system he had built, enough to confirm his existence, but not enough to dismantle it. The archive, he warned, was heavily encrypted and impossible to access without biometric authentication, a measure he had implemented himself at the syndicate's behest. Days after his initial contact, Caleb's fears were validated. His safe house was breached in the middle of the night by masked intruders. Security cameras, ironically of his own design, captured their precision and efficiency. Caleb barely escaped to a hidden passage, taking only a laptop and a small duffel bag. His disappearance left investigators with more questions than answers. What Caleb had shared painted a terrifying picture, but it was only a glimpse. Without him, the investigation stalled. His warnings about the syndicate's far-reaching power proved true. As evidence vanished, witnesses recanted their statements, and officials connected to the case resigned under mysterious circumstances. Caleb's flight was seen by many as a betrayal, but others believe it was the only way he could stay alive. Some still believe Caleb is out there, a shadow among shadows, holding the keys to the syndicate's secrets. Whether he will ever resurface remains one of the many mysteries surrounding the organization. And Chapter 4, The Unseen Enemy. The hunt for the syndicate grew more desperate as the months turned into years, but every lead seemed to dissolve into the shadows. Law enforcement found themselves chasing ghosts, and the deeper they dug, the more resistance they faced. Witnesses who had initially agreed to testify either vanished or recanted their statements, citing fear for their lives. Evidence disappeared from secure storage, and even seasoned investigators found themselves doubting whether the truth could ever emerge. Emma Ward's family refused to let her case fade into obscurity. They sold their home to hire private investigators who uncovered a troubling pattern. Over the past decade, numerous individuals who had dared to question Briarwood's hidden dealings had either died under suspicious circumstances or vanished entirely. What had once been dismissed as coincidence now formed a chilling picture. The syndicate was erasing anyone who threatened their existence. The private investigators discovered that the syndicate's reach extended far beyond Briarwood. Similar disappearances were reported in neighboring towns and cities, often involving journalists, whistleblowers, and activists. These individuals had all been investigating corruption, fraud, or criminal enterprises when their lives were abruptly cut short. The scale of the syndicate's operation was staggering, suggesting a network so vast and well-organized that it seemed impossible to infiltrate. Despite these revelations, the lack of a clear leader or identifiable hierarchy frustrated investigators. The syndicate operated like a phantom, its presence felt but never seen. The only consistent element was its ability to silence opposition, often through subtle yet devastating means. Financial ruin, public disgrace, or sudden accidents were their tools of choice. If those failed, more permanent measures were taken. One breakthrough came when a forensic audit revealed ties between the syndicate and a multinational conglomerate. The corporation, outwardly legitimate, had been implicated in several global scandals involving illegal arms deals and human trafficking. Yet no direct link could be proven, as those who tried to connect the dots found themselves discredited or worse. The investigators' efforts took a dark turn when they became targets themselves. Surveillance teams reported being followed, their offices were broken into, and their families received anonymous threats. One investigator, determined to continue despite the risks, was killed in a hit-and-run accident. Though officially ruled an accident, those close to the case were certain it was a warning. The syndicate's most terrifying weapon was its invisibility. By remaining hidden in plain sight, it ensured that its enemies fought shadows rather than faces. For every piece of evidence uncovered, 10 more questions arose. Even those determined to expose the truth found themselves ensnared in the same fear that silenced others. Emma Ward's case became a symbol of the fight against an unseen enemy. While her disappearance sparked a firestorm of investigation, it also highlighted the chilling reality of the syndicate's power. They were everywhere and nowhere, a force capable of erasing lives, evidence, and hope. But the syndicate had anticipated this. The whistleblower's identity was never uncovered. But their defection triggered a calculated counterstrike. Key investigators found their reputations smeared overnight, accused of fabricated crimes or facing financial ruin. Critical witnesses recanted their statements, citing threats against their families. Evidence mysteriously vanished, and those who pursued the truth were met with unrelenting resistance. Public attention, once fervent, began to waver as new scandals and crises emerged. Media coverage shifted, and the momentum against the syndicate slowed. Governments quietly disbanded task forces, citing a lack of progress. What had seemed like the beginning of the end for the syndicate became just another chapter in their story of survival. Despite the setbacks, fragments of resistance persisted. Independent journalists and online activists continued to piece together the puzzle, keeping Emma Ward's legacy alive. Her name became a symbol of courage in the face of overwhelming darkness. But for every small victory, the Syndicate adapted, evolving its methods and retreating further into the shadows. By 2019, the Syndicate remained intact, albeit scarred by the leaks. The archive was presumed dismantled, but its existence left a lingering question. How many lives were still ensnared by the group's secrets? Emma's disappearance remained unsolved, her fate a haunting reminder of the cost of seeking the truth. In the end, the Shadow Syndicate's story served as a grim testament to the resilience of power and the fragility of justice. While the world moved on, the echoes of its influence lingered, a whisper in the dark, reminding those who listen that some battles are never truly won.